In Jujutsu Kaisen, Ryomen Sukuna is different from everyone else in the series due to being able to transcend the bounds of simply being strong with his overwhelming sense of self. This led to him becoming unanimously known as the strongest sorcerer in the Heian era, which was the strongest period of Jutsu sorcery. And even more recently in the manga, he's been able to defeat Gojo Satoru, who was known as the strongest sorcerer of the current age. But now that Gojo's gone, more problems arrive for Sukuna due to backup coming such as Yuta and Yuji. And in this video, I want to go over whether Sukuna should actually feel pressured or worried about the fact that this backup has actually come for him or not, since he now has amazing abilities such as the World Slash, which I'll explain further in detail in this video. But before we begin, I'd like to say that if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, as I will be making more Jujutsu Kaisen content just like this in the future. Now, to answer the question of whether or not Sukuna should be worried about the current situation that he's in, we must first go over the current stakes of the series. All we know as of now is that Sukuna cannot use his RCT to the fullest extent that he could like versus Gojo because of the damage he sustained to his brain during his fight with Gojo. He is also now currently in Yuta's domain, which houses all of the curse techniques that he has copied throughout his life, and the sure hit most likely is imbued with Angel's curse technique, which is already shown to be able to do massive amounts of damage to Sukuna. So this limits him even more since he has to use the ability of Hollow Wicker Basket, which forces him to use 2 arms and 1 mouth. And on top of that, he also has someone like Yuji on the field, who if he hits him enough, can split his soul from Megami for Shigeru's body. So now that we've established the current stakes and the idea that these characters can indeed somehow beat Sukuna if they get to the right positions, we should establish if it's even likely that they would get to these positions in the first place. And for that, we have to first go over what Sukuna has in his arsenal. Now currently, like I mentioned before, he doesn't have access to his domain expansion or his full reverse curse technique output, but he will have access to them very soon. But excluding those 2 abilities, Sukuna still has his normal Cleave and Dismantle. Cleave being an ability that adjusts itself depending on the toughness of the opponent, as well as their curse energy level in order to attempt to kill them in 1 slash, and Dismantle, which is generally used on things that lack curse energy, but is equally as effective against things that have curse energy. And Sukuna also learned how to cut through the road of self from watching Maharaga cut through infinity, giving him the ability to essentially negate durability, since rather than cutting you himself, he's simply just cutting everything including yourself. But it does seem like this takes quite a lot of cursed energy since he does have to charge it up and use enchantments in order to make it stronger. But abilities such as normal Cleave and Dismantle seem not to be able to one-shot people like Yuta and Yuji, as both of them have been able to take these attacks and heal from them right after. So excluding something like the Space Dismantle, it doesn't seem like Sukuna could actually one-shot these 2. But this leads on to another question, which I think personally is the most important question of the whole video, which is whether or not Sukuna is actually going all out against these 2 people. And in my opinion, I don't think Sukuna is trying his hardest during this fight. Although we do know that he plans to kill these people, due to what he says in the last chapter, this doesn't inherently mean he's going all out. It's not like his fight with Gojo or Kashimo, where he's showing both of them his ultimate strength in order to teach them about the idea and the title of the strongest. But rather, I just believe he's utilizing the ideals that he portrayed to Kashimo, where he says he eats when he wants to eat, he plays with what amuses him, and kills whoever is in his way. And when he's asked if this ever gets boring or old, he says no, every human has a unique and fleeting taste, which makes devouring them a perfect way to pass time until death. Which kind of gives me the idea that he's simply trying to get as much fun out of these people as he can. Since he does mention that Yuta was probably going to be his main dish, and he purposefully tries to make Yuta angry by saying that if Yuta doesn't kill Sukuna, he's just going to kill everyone that Yuta loves. So it's kind of a similar thing to when he was fighting Higuruma, and he was simply trying to make him evolve and to see the full lengths of his talents. So now that we've gone over why I think Sukuna isn't necessarily going all out, we can now go over what he's been hiding from Yuji and Yuta. And the most blatant answer to this question is the Flame Arrow. If you don't remember this ability, this is something that Sukuna used way back when he fought Jogo, decimate Jogo in simply 1 hit. And it also finished off a pretty weakened Maharaga. And in the fanbook, these flames are described as being able to destroy the enemy in an instant and tearing them apart and burning them down to their bone marrow. And even in more recent chapters, they got a lot of hype by Kusakabe saying that it would burn everyone to toast if Sukuna decided to use it. But that's all of the confirmed abilities that Sukuna has currently, I guess you could say. But now we can dive into more of the interesting things, such as the black box that Sukuna holds. Way back whenever Sukuna used the fire arrow against Jogo, a black box first appeared in a text bubble, and then Sukuna said open. Now this black box that pops up is most likely a reference to Gege's previous work called Number 9. This previous manga that Gege created has a lot of similarities to Jujutsu Kaisen, but this specifically is very uncanny, as this manga has the main character using an ability called Box 9 with the box showing up that was mentioned earlier. But instead of this ability being a literal black box, it is possible that this is simply censorship of a word. such as what we see in something like Bleach, when the name Yuha is attempted to be spoken, and it's later revealed that his name was technically erased from existence. I also wanted to mention that I think that the black box that Sukuna has isn't necessarily related to the black box that Kusakabe says holds the curse techniques in the brain. And the main problem I have with people thinking this is that Kusakabe says specifically that the brain is like a black box system, but in the translation done by TCB scans, he says the brain, especially the part of the brain where curse techniques are concerned, is a black box. And the translator note specifically states that the black box that he's talking about is a system that operates as we have no knowledge of its internal workings, which I take to believe simply means that we don't know enough about the part of the brain which holds the curse techniques to go out on a limb like Gojo and Sukuna to just simply break it and heal it again, since it was possible that that simply wouldn't work. But while the black box could be a reference to simply the unknown, it could also be a reference to something in computer science. In computer science, a black box is basically an AI system where you can put in an input and get some kind of output from it. And the way we will link this to Sukuna and his curse technique is kind of confusing, but hear me out real quick. We see that directly after fighting someone like Jogo, who uses flames, he is able to use flames as well. And the immediate question that arises is, how is he able to create flames with a technique that has to do with cleaving and slashing? But this isn't the only time that something like this happens. There's also the fact that rather he fights Gojo, someone who can't be touched by normal means, he's able to create his own pseudo-infinity using tiny slashes to make it so Yuta's sword can never truly touch him. So instead of simply having fire, I think the Sukuna might be able to simply move slashes at such high speeds that they create fire themselves, similar to what Might Guy does whenever he's using a Sakujaku, since there's virtually no other way cleave and dismantle are connected to fire. And while this is quite a bit of a stretch, it is possible that he's giving the input of the other person's curse technique, and the output is a way that he can replicate it due to his immense skill and ability to broaden the interpretation of his own curse technique. Think of it like Maharaga's wheel mixed with Yuta's copy. But going back to the more commonly accepted theories between Sukuna and his curse technique, there are quite a few similarities between Sukuna's technique and the technique from number 9, such as them both being implied to be invisible by normal means, even going all the way to the hand gestures that they use while using their specific techniques. The idea would be that Sukuna is using empty boxes with their size adjusted to the size of that of a knife, resulting in abilities such as cleave and dismantle. But since there is such a thing as an empty box, there also should logically be such a thing as a full box. And in the most common theory, it is theorized that these abilities are stored within Sukuna's own tattoos. This is fairly backed up by the fact that whenever Sukuna is holding Kamotoke and the spear that he has during the Heian era, he surprisingly has 2 less tattoos than when he's in Yuji or Megumi's body. So in this theory, Sukuna would be going around the Heian era, simply taking the abilities of other people as well as taking cursed tools that he deems useful. But all in all, Sukuna's curse technique is a complete mystery, and we don't know what it truly holds, and he definitely hasn't shown us the fullest extent of it. And one more thing that extensively proves this is the absence of Sukuna's maximum techniques and reversal techniques. And in the fanbook, it is stated that maximum techniques are the peak of Jujutsu sorcery barring domain expansions. And since Sukuna can't really use his domain expansion right now, it would make sense for him to go to the second strongest ability that he probably has. The idea of a maximum technique from Sukuna sounds very interesting, but there's not many places you can go with it. The first thing I thought of was kind of a copy of Maximum Uzumaki, where instead of creating an amalgamation of cursed spirits you have, Sukuna creates an amalgamation of all the cursed techniques that he holds as well as cursed tools, creating an insanely potent blast of energy. Or maybe he would just be able to use the maximum techniques of the other techniques that he's already copied. But due to the overall mysterious nature of his cursed technique in general, there's really no way for us to tell what his actual maximum technique would be, or if he even holds one. But Sukuna should be able to use a curse technique reversal, as he is shown to be a very proficient user of positive energy and reverse curse technique, so it's not too crazy to say that he will be able to imbue this positive energy into his own curse technique. If we're simply talking about abilities like cleave and dismantle, the obvious antithesis of these abilities would just to be to assemble things, or put things back together. And this would make some sense if we added on to the theory of him, copying abilities by eating people and whatnot, since it's not too outlandish that he would be able to bind together or assemble other people's curse techniques onto himself, or rather into an empty part of his shrine technique. But to answer the question of if Sukuna should truly be worried as of right now, my answer would be no, not really. There are obviously ways that the current cast could pull off a dub on Sukuna, but it just doesn't seem likely due to the things that he's been hiding from them and purposely not using, even when he's in bad situations. Unless Sukuna truly begins using some of his amazing techniques in the next few chapters, I doubt that he actually is taking this fight too seriously, but is rather simply enjoying his time fighting Yuta, his main course, and Yuji, someone who actually has the potential to stop him with his soul hitting attacks. But Sukuna still has plenty much more in his bag and possibly even more curse techniques that he holds within his shrine or his tattoos and whatnot. And pretty soon, it seems like he's going to be able to use his domain expansion again, which will undoubtedly beat Yuta's domain in a domain clash, because his can actually break the outside barrier of Yuta's domain. And by that time, he'll also have his reverse curse technique back at full output, meaning that any damage that they do to him will virtually be irrelevant. But that's pretty much all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, since it'll tell me to make more Jujutsu Kaisen content just like this in the future. But yeah, goodbye.